The reasons midterm elections matter. Tonight, our political panel takes a look at some of the most closely watched congressional races in the region. This is What Matters. Good evening, I'm Kathy Lewis. On November 2nd, the race in the 2nd District is the one that they'll be talking about at the national level as the media take the measure of this much-anticipated midterm election. Here's the background. Democratic Congressman Glenn Nye was elected the same night President Barack Obama was, beating Republican Congresswoman Thelma Drake. Almost immediately, the pressure was on. The economy was beginning its sluggish job recovery, but the pulse was weak. Then came health care reform, and the Democratic congressman broke party ranks and voted against the bill. But even before that, Republicans were lining up to make a bid for the district, among them Kenny Golden, a former vice chair of the party. But Golden abandoned the party in the spring for an independent bid. There were still 6 Republicans left in the field, but by June, the party had settled on auto dealer Scott Rigell. So now it's a 3-way race. Incumbent Democratic Congressman Glenn Nye, Republican challenger Scott Rigell, and Independent challenger Kenny Golden. And joining us tonight for a look at the race and the status of the other 3 House districts are Don Lozado, the editorial page editor for the Virginian Pilot, Dr. Charles Dunn, who is dean of the Robertson School of Government at Regent University, and Dr. Quentin Kidd, who's a political science professor at Christopher Newport University. This actual show qualifies you for 3 college credits because we have 2 professors.
I mean,
tuition rates are going
That's right. That's right. You know, that's right. We're always lifelong learners. Always lifelong learners. Well, thanks to all of you for being with us tonight. What an interesting situation we find ourselves in now. And I guess the question, Dr. Dunn, for you is it a lot of hype about the importance of the midterms, or is it really significant?
Very significant. The law of history. History teaches us much about this. 5 presidents in the modern age of presidential elections at the midterm have had job approval ratings under 50%, and President Obama is the 6th. The range of losses between 17, a low under Carter, and 54 under Lyndon Johnson, averaging out at about 34. So the expectation here in the law of history is we'll see a large loss of seats for the Democrats. Second law is that of the law of economics, that is the dominant issue that will govern in this race. And all these other issues, yes, they're important, and they may figure in a little bit, but the economic issue is playing in the hands of the Republican Party. And then one other thing that's quite important. In 2008, President Obama was able to generate a lot of support across the board, all groups of people. But in none of those groups now is there that level of support, and even among African Americans. So in this district, the 2nd District, that African American vote was crucial, vital to Glenn Nye's victory. That vote is not going to be there in the same number as it was 2 years ago.
250,000 new voters just before the election in 2008. By August, 40% of those new voters 25 and under. So, Don Lozado, you think it's pretty likely then that not all of those voters are going to show up this time around?
I don't see it, because I don't see the level of engagement that you saw in 08. I think a lot of people who were passionate supporters of the president in 08 are going to find something else to do on November 2nd.
What's your take?
Yeah, no, I just think we're going to see a different electorate, an electorate that has a character that's totally different. It's going to be much older, much whiter, much more conservative. You know, you've got turnout in the 2nd congressional district in 2008 and across the state in the 60s, upper 60%. You're going to have mid 40% turnout in this congressional election. Right. And the difference between a mid 40 turnout and a mid 60 turnout is a completely different electorate. And the electorate that's going to turn out is angry, anxious, frustrated. They don't trust what's going on in Washington, and they're going to express that in at the ballot box.
You know, Quentin, you talk about that issue of trust, and it seems to me that that is such a critical factor as we head into these midterms. I'm thinking about the way that, in some respects, we are conflating a number of events. Certainly locally,
sure.
You know, you've had a CSB worker who was getting paid for 12 years without showing up for work. You've had some credit card abuse issues. You've had the recent location last last week of the extra $1 billion in the state budget. I don't know about you. If I did not have $1 billion, I would miss it.
Right.
I would be missing that.
I would like to find that extra money in my budget.
It's a little more than change in the soda, right? So it seems to me that all of this is, I hear it to some extent on the air, that all of this is kind of conflating into a generalized dissatisfaction or lack of trust. That's just an
there's a disillusionment. But a national survey shows that women are more disillusioned than men, and that the female vote turnout will be much less than it was before, which is another factor working against the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, I think one of the things that I find very interesting, and we've covered all of those episodes that you talked about, is that people tend to not just conflate them geographically, they're conflating them in every way.
Yes.
So what's bad in your city is bad in the state, is bad in the nation, and it's sort of, I think it's understandable, but I worry a little bit about the complete absence of confidence in government's ability to do some competent things, because we need them to put out fires and protect our streets and educate our kids.
Yeah, I think it's important, and we're going to have a wave election again. And we've had a wave election the last 2 federal elections. And I think it's a real problem, and it suggests a problem. If every federal election we have a wave election, it means that Republicans in power can't do anything that satisfies voters, and Democrats in power can't do anything that satisfies voters. And that suggests a general, not to channel Jimmy Carter here, but a general malaise that really needs to be addressed in some way, I think.
It seems so as well. Would you agree with that?
Yes, but this raises a question about what kind of president will Mr. Obama go down in history as?
Yes.
Will he go down as a Jimmy Carter? Many people say so. Others are hoping that he will be a Bill Clinton and learn from this year.
Because Bill Clinton was in this in a similar circumstance, but maybe what were his approval ratings like? Better or worse than Obama's at this point?
I think his approval ratings are actually a little better than Obama's are. I think Obama's pushing at some historical lows in terms of midterm approval ratings. I think there's a point there that shouldn't go missed. I think Democrats and I think White House advisors ran a risk that they knew they were going to take losses in the midterms. They were going to go ahead and eat those losses to accomplish some legislative accomplishments. And the Obama administration can point to some real legislative victories that, if he had walked soft, may not have been accomplished, but he may not have lost as much. Now, you can debate that, but I think that was a calculated risk on their part.
Okay. Will he be a Carter or a Clinton or a Lyndon Johnson? Recall that figure of loss at midterm.
Right.
Johnson's loss was the highest of all of the presidents who had a job approval rating at that time, under 50%. So one could make a strong case there that they went for the whole enchilada, and they're suffering for it. If they had effected some compromises along the way, they'd be in a much better position. And President Obama, who's a very articulate and bright individual, would have been in a better position to lead the country to do the things that you're talking about, bringing us together and reducing some of the distrust that's there.
Well, some of the things that LBJ went for, I mean, he went for some major pieces of legislation during his time in the Oval Office, and he paid for it at midterm. I mean, but I think the interesting thing that you raised about the wave is that what I see is, even if the Republican wave is as huge as the Republicans propose, you will still not have a supermajority in the Senate, and so we're still going to have a legislative system that stalls in one of the houses, that because it has become so partisan and so polarized that it takes 61 votes to do anything.
Well, you're going to have gridlock in 2 ways. You're going to have gridlock if the 2 chambers are controlled by different parties, but you're going to have gridlock in the Senate as well, because the 60-vote threshold has become the way to pass legislation. And so if the majority party has 52 seats, 54 seats, that's probably what the Democrats are going to end up with. They're not going to be able to get anything done.
Nothing.
And I'm guessing then that Senator Warner's proposal for a radical centrist movement is probably not going to really take hold in this environment.
See, we have here civil war, but there are other civil wars. In the Democratic Party, there's a civil war between the intellectual liberals of the suburbs on one hand and the public service unions on the other. And then there's a civil war between the Blue Dog Democrats and we'll call them the Pelosi Democrats. So the Democrats have civil wars within their midst in the Congress. Republicans also have civil wars. Every bit as dangerous and divisive, the Tea Party versus the establishment, to illustrate. So beneath the surface of the gridlock that you're talking about, there are other civil wars that will make it even more difficult, which means, again, we need the strength of a president who can reach out across the aisle and across those diverse groups to build trust.
I wonder if that aisle isn't now protected by an electric fence, though. I mean, it's, you know, the ability to actually talk across party lines is sort of gone. And that's always been the Virginia way. I mean, we've always sort of, our politics have been about how do we solve this problem? Not about, you know,
this is true.
Not about the politics, not about hewing to some sort of ideological line. And you just see that absent entirely now in Washington.
Yes, we need individuals who will stand up as profiles in courage now. You know, John F. Kennedy's book, Profiles in Courage, that I still recommend my students read. If you go back to what you cited on the Johnson wave of legislation, Medicare, Medicaid, Civil Rights Act, Voting Rights Act, enormous pieces of legislation. But he couldn't produce those without Everett, McKinley, Dirksen.
Yeah,
they work well together. That's what we need.
You know, I'm curious about that because we've, of course, had the health care bill passed. Glenn Nye voted against it. Congressman Nye in the 2nd District voted against it. He says he did it on principle because he felt like it didn't do enough to control costs and it was going to cause some problems for people in TRICARE. You know, I've heard a lot of back-channel chatter about this. Some Democrats saying, look, I sent you there to get the health care done, and you didn't get it done. And then I've heard Republicans say, if you think that that was going to lure me, probably not.
Well,
I mean, so what kind of position is he in there?
I think Glenn Nye won in a wave election where the electorate that turned out in the 2nd wasn't the normal 2nd District electorate.
Okay.
And I think he tried to be a member of Congress representing the normal, traditional 2nd District. Which is slightly right of center, and more Owen Pickett-like than not.
Owen Pickett, a former congressman.
Former Congressman Pickett. So the question is that going to work?
I think that's going to be so. I mean, I take him at his word about why, and I accept that that was a principled decision for him. I'm just going to be very interested to see how it works out.
It gets worse because there's another element that you see from conservatives who say, well, he would have voted for it if they needed his vote.
Yes.
And
he waited
there was
until
literally
Pelosi
no
had
way.
all the votes.
Right.
Yeah.
There was nothing he could have done that would have satisfied even
I think
even
that's
a significant portion of his district.
Which I think goes back to this whole question of where we are right at the moment. That nothing is really making us happy. We're just kind of cranky all over the place.
I think we have to speak well of Glenn Nye. I believe he has done an excellent job under difficult circumstances representing this district. Here he is, a Democrat representing what is essentially a conservative Republican district, and he faces the pressures of Nancy Pelosi and others. I think he has balanced as good as a person could balance as well as. So I speak well of him, but when it comes down to looking at what you're pointing out, who's going to turn out to vote? The votes, unless there's a big change, aren't there. But we also have to give him credit. He was the principal leader with regard to the emerging group of Democrats on the tax cut issue. So he's demonstrated some leadership.
And the other issue that came up during his time was, of course, the prospective carrier move. He got hit a little bit on this GIFCOM thing. But what I think is interesting about that is the allegation is he didn't do enough about that. But then Congressman Randy Forbes, Republican of the 4th, is also credited as sort of being the spokesperson on this. So, you know, I don't know how you play that out. Do you know what I mean? I mean,
on GIFCOM?
Yeah.
I mean, I think what happened was we didn't know it was happening. I mean, nobody knew what was going on.
I don't think you can fault anybody on that.
I guess that's what I'm saying. So it seems like Glenn Nye sort of taken the hit for this, and I guess I'm not sure that that's appropriate when nobody really knew.
Anybody in office right now would take a hit.
And should.
But especially if you're in a competitive election, you're going to take a bigger hit.
So what about this GIFCOM thing? I think this is very interesting to watch the way this is going to play out. You say they should take a hit for it. You feel like they should have known this was coming?
Well, politically, I mean, this is what happened during BRAC in 05 when Oceana was under threat. I mean, we didn't know, and it was a surprise, and everybody's hair was on fire for a good couple of months. And in this case, I mean, I think you can make an argument that they should have, if they shouldn't have known, they should have acted like it was under greater threat, and they should have. And there was a reaction that I thought was a little confused, a little confusing, and deeply political on the part of some of the folks, and I think that was just very counterproductive.
Yeah, the idea that Secretary Gates has been looking to make efficiencies in the defense budget is nothing new.
Not new.
He's been talking about this since he became Secretary of Defense. So the idea that he was thinking along these lines and that he had working groups in the Pentagon looking at areas to cut is nothing new. And so it shouldn't have been a surprise. Yeah. Anything that would have come out of there representing any part of Hampton Roads military infrastructure shouldn't have been a surprise.
Yeah, and I guess that's true. I take you at your point. But again, it goes back to this trust issue. You know, when you see buildings continuing to be constructed after we've already learned that this thing is going to close.
Right.
All of that, I think, contributes to this moment in which we find ourselves. Let's talk for a moment about the Republican Party, the Republican candidate in Virginia Beach, in the second, I should say, Scott Rigell. He signed a no-tax pledge with the Tea Party. Some say, why'd you do that? Did you really have to do that?
This was smart politics for him and for the Tea Party. I like to look at it this way. The Tea Party nationally needs to recognize it will have to win by dying. These movements like the Tea Party come and go historically, and they usually go sooner rather than later. They have a one moment in the sun to have impact. Right now the Tea Party can have great impact. They've energized a lot of people. So wisely, Mrs. Hurd got this pledge together and got Scott Rigell to sign. In effect, they sent a signal without saying, we're endorsing you, but really, you're our candidate. And if they do that all over the country, they'll be aligning themselves with candidates who, in effect, are for Tea Party values and policies. So that's what I mean by winning by dying. So Scott Rigell, I think, from his standpoint, did the right thing, and that's a lesson to Republicans nationally, rather than to, you know, the sour grapes of people like Castle in Delaware. I'm not going to support her, or Milkowski in
running a writing campaign now. Yeah.
I mean, they look bad. When the primary's over, it's over. You know, get behind your candidate.
Yeah.
I think Chuck's point about the Tea Party movement is a movement that is focused on an issue that will die. The reason it'll die is not because the issue is not important. It's that one of the two political parties will incorporate it, or both of them will incorporate the lessons of that movement. So in that context, I think Republicans have, all in all, done a really good job of managing the Tea Party movement, because they've candidates and the party generally have tried to figure out how to get close enough to it to win with it, but not so close that you get pulled in a direction that is too outside of the mainstream. Now, whether they've done that well enough or not, we'll know on Election Day.
And so what's the implication of this for Independent Kenny Golden, former chair of the Republican Party in Virginia Beach?
I think Scott Rigell, in any other election, would be the establishment Republican. He's the establishment Republican in this context, but he's done a good job of scooting just close enough to the Tea Party movement-oriented people to capture their support, but not so far that he loses mainstream sort of Republicans. And so I think that really, I think that sort of pushes Kenny Golden out of the way for the most part.
But do you think that Golden's success in the race to date, I mean, you know, he's on the ballot, and there's always an issue about debates and who's in and who's not. Does that speak to this issue that Dean Dunn was talking about in terms of a sort of a civil war from the Republican Party perspective?
I'm not entirely sure that represents a civil war. I think that's a rather more personal sort of internal break there. And I don't see that much light between their positions. I think that, as Dr. Kidd said, they maneuvered, Scott Rigell maneuvered in a way to really crowd Golden out of this race, I think.
Interesting.
Yeah, I concur in that. Scott Rigell, once he got over this business of saying, well, I'm not going to debate with Kenny Golden, which was very foolish of him, he is now conducting an excellent campaign. I think we have to give Rigell high marks for the tone and as well as the substance of his campaign. So what I see is we have three excellent candidates there. They're all able people. And if you're Glenn Nye, you got to hope that Nye is going to pull off a lot of votes, which that's not likely to happen because of this agreement between Scott Rigell and Tea Party.
Speaking of agreements, we've always heard there's been this sort of informal agreement in the Republican Party at the state level between now Governor McDonnell and the Lieutenant Governor Bill Bolling. You take it this time, you run this time, I'll pick it up next time. Now comes Attorney General Cuccinelli, who says in Northern Virginia last week, well, if I decide to run for governor, I will not wait in line behind anybody. I mean, and he'd always said he wanted to be another term as Attorney General, loved that job. What's your take?
Yeah, I mean, I think anyone who didn't think he was running for some office the day he took the oath of office for his current job is, not paying attention. And it's clear, you just watch his personality, watch the way he behaves. It's clear that he's aggressive. He calls himself an aggressive conservative, and he's going to go after whatever it is he chooses to go after. Anyone in the way be damned. And he's just making that very clear, very early. And he's set up this political infrastructure around the state already as well. I mean, this guy's 9 months into his first year of a 4-year term, and he's setting up a political infrastructure. So I think Virginia is going to be dealing with Ken Cuccinelli for a long time.
He makes things interesting. I will tell you, from a media perspective, he is probably, well, I will call him among a handful of the most accessible state figures that we've had from a media perspective. We can always get his office on the phone. They always talk to us. We'll do the show when we ask. And I find that a very interesting development, particularly when you look at it in this context.
But he does not shy from this debate.
No.
I've said this for years on this program. In fact, there has not been a surprise about Ken Cuccinelli since the beginning. He is who he said he was going to be, and he is pushing the issues that he said he was going to push, and he is winning. He is winning a lot of those debates.
So is that a different style of politics that says, if you don't want to vote for me, don't vote for me, because here's what I'm going to do?
Right. It's different and new to the state of Virginia. I would add to what Quentin said, the political infrastructure he's created, and he automatically inherited a legal infrastructure around the state. So he has two things going for him here, and with his natural ability in handling the media, he's off and running. Bill Bolling can't catch up with him, frankly.
Well, let's not forget that he likes to say he got more votes than any attorney general in Virginia, including the current occupant of the governor's house. So.
Well, he's used the Attorney General's office as no one before him ever even thought about using it.
We've got less than a minute left, but I want to find out what kind of job you think Tim Kaine is doing with the Democratic National Committee. It's a tough time to be the chair of the DNC, isn't it?
I think he is doing as good a job as one could expect someone to do in that situation.
We'll know the night of election. I think the jury's still out on him.
We'll get the grade then. We'll get the grade on November 3rd.
And you were saying, if you were advising, Dean Dunn, you said you would advise Democrats to be very enthusiastic about what they're going to do, and Republicans to pull it back a little bit. Not to.
But for the Democrats to say, it's like a coach going into a game. Always talk to the other team, boy, they're going to beat us, they're going to beat us. So that's the kind of, you got to have that kind of pep talk for your troops.
Well, I tell you, it's going to be an interesting election night, and that's what makes this whole business so interesting. And I love having you all here to talk about it. I thank you. I congratulate you on your ties as well. I have to just say, the tie selection tonight is really stunning.
All right, we did it for you.
And it's all festive. It's election festive, and I like that. I like that. Thanks to all of you for being with us. Be back in a moment with a final thought. As we said just a few moments ago, again this year we have revisited the debate about debates, that is, who gets to participate at the podium. It's my personal belief, and in fact this station's policy, although those are completely unrelated, that if you have what it takes to convince the State Board of Elections that you should be on the ballot, then you deserve a seat at the table. Now, our policy means absolutely nothing when it comes to debates conducted throughout the community. And there's always a little bit of a kerfluffle when one candidate refuses to play if another one is invited. Now, the political part of me understands entirely why a candidate, especially one who's ahead, would not want to participate in a debate. There's very little upside and a whole lot of potential to find one's foot in one's mouth. But the fan of fair play in me thinks that if you're going to run for office, you ought to be willing to participate in any and all debates that come along. When a candidate puts participation parameters on a debate, it forces debate organizers into time-consuming shuttle diplomacy, trying to get candidates to actually show up in front of those whose votes they seek. Now, I have a lot of respect for debate organizers. It is a thankless job. Nobody gets rich doing it. In fact, it's become so onerous that many organizations have just opted to take a pass. So when you see a debate this fall, take a moment to appreciate the volunteers who've practiced UN-style diplomacy to make it happen. Because if that debate isn't the frank exchange of ideas you were hoping for, it probably has more to do with the campaigns of the candidates than it does with the poor beleaguered volunteers who work hard on all of our behalf. You can watch any of our programs online at whatmatters.tv, and while you're there, tell us what you think, and you can sign up for our weekly newsletter. That's so we can let you know what we have in the works as soon as we know what we have in the works here on What Matters. For more local talk, I hope you'll join us on the radio dial for Hearsay. We're live each noon on 89.5 WHRV NPR for Hampton Roads. Thanks again for watching. I'm Kathy Lewis, and we'll see you next time for another look at What Matters.